What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Monstrosities Voice Horrors Untouched Conversations, the podcast for Black Horror by Black Horror. I'm your lovely host, Kaija Feels, back with another festive episode, and I want y'all to guess what we're going to talk about today. Drum roll! We're talking about Black Christmas 1974, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. So since I'm going to be collaborating with a few other members of the Black horror community on a more in-depth conversation regarding the original and the two remakes, I just wanted to take some time to talk about just some of the feminist and social commentary undertones in the original 1974 film. So I have my notes here, so don't mind me if I look down at my laptop. So we have Black Christmas, made in 1974, directed by Bob Clark. It is a Canadian 70s slasher which heavily inspired John Carpenter's 1978 film Halloween. Obviously, especially if you watch the movie, you know Halloween really owes a lot of its credit to Black Christmas. And actually, Black Christmas takes a lot of the trope from the urban legend of the babysitter or the man upstairs. It's kind of like when a stranger calls, whenever she calls or she's on the phone with the police and they're like, the call is coming from inside the house. So it's like an urban legend and a trope that they kind of took from that. So let's go ahead and talk about the synopsis of the film. You have the sorority of Pi Kappa Sig, and they are sorority sisters. They live in this house, and they're pretty much getting offed by this serial killer who harasses them via telephone and talks about sexually explicit things on the phone, and it's just so disgusting. And he pretty much kills each sister one by one. So I want to go ahead and get into the breakdown of the women of Pi Kappa Sig. So we have this group of women, and you can kind of tell by some of the things that are in the sorority house, like the free love posters and just how they interact with each other, that they're a bit more progressive, especially for women in the 70s. They are all, or most of them, excluding Claire, who kind of is presumed to be a virgin, are sexually active. They drink, and it's like overt, and they smoke, and you know, they tell dirty jokes to each other. Barb, who is my absolute favorite, and it's so funny because I get on Twitter and everybody is posting about Barb since it's the holiday season, and they say that she is a bisexual legend, and I live for her. So I was reading an article just to brush up on some research by Ashley M on the anatomy. Let me double check the anatomy of a Scream. I just want to make sure I got that correct. And she stated that Black Christmas is a film that shows how a male-controlled culture makes it practically impossible for women to express their bodily autonomy, independence, and sexual safety. So with Black Christmas, it really talks about the daily horrors women face in a culture that refuses to allow them, or us as women, to express our autonomy and individuality without harassment and violence. So, you know, the women are sexually active. They drink, they laugh, they tell dirty jokes, they have the posters, they live together in like this utopia of presumed safety. So let's start off with a few things. Let's start off first with the call that Barb gets, played by Mario Kidder. So all the women are kind of like, they're used to the phone calls, but they're also like afraid of them at the same time. So the fact that they're kind of unfazed by this extreme form of sexual harassment, if you've seen the film, the Billy, or the serial killer Billy, calls the sorority house regularly and makes these disgusting remarks regarding what he wants to do to these women, and I'll let y'all watch the movie to figure out exactly what he says. And everybody's just sitting around crowding Barb to figure out what's going on and what's being said. And Barb is kind of like this character that is the really like strong city girl, like, you know, I've dealt with this before in the city, there's no problem, like, you know, go F yourself, yada yada yada. The only character that seems to be kind of overtly disgruntled by this is Claire, who like I said before, is presumed to be this virgin, and she's in shambles because there's rumors to be a rape that had happened nearby in another sorority house. So that is the first example of her not being safe in her surroundings and in her home. And again, the vulgar things that this dude is saying is absolutely fucking disgusting. So yeah, number one, the normacy of that is just like whatever. But it really wasn't until Billy had uttered, and you can kind of hear in his voice where he's like, I'm going to kill you. And Barb is like, whoa, like this nigga's serious. Like he's about to kill me. And you can kind of tell she was taken aback by that. But then also the dynamic between Claire and Barb, after how Claire storms off and she's like, yo, I got a pack to go see my parents, and Barb is like, you know, whatever, you're a virgin, you can't rape a townsy, XYZ. She is projecting her fear that she feels from being on the phone with Billy onto Claire. But at the same time, Barb, she ain't no bitch. Like, she, you know what I'm saying? Like, she's not going to just let anybody try to punk her. And of course, we all know by seeing the film. Also, I didn't give a disclaimer. If you have not seen Black Christmas, please go watch it before listening to this episode. I think Claire's death is the most sinister of them all because her body is really left there throughout the duration of the film. And for those that haven't seen the movie, Billy comes and strangles her with some plastic and then just leaves her body sitting in like this in the glass window throughout the entire movie. She's the first one to die. And which is interesting, that kind of plays on that whole final girl trope because it is presumed that Claire's a virgin, but she's the first one to die. And also it kind of plays on the dynamic of like leaving the safety of like being around women, especially like when we go to the restroom together, when we're out at a club or things like that. She left that safety net and then she ended up being a victim. So interesting enough, after Claire goes missing, her parents, after her parents come and they figure out that she's been missing, her dad is really like very judgmental towards the sorority house, the house mother, and just the activity and the things that go on in the house. And it's interesting because he automatically assumes that she is drinking, she's with boys, she's doing all of these things, and it's just like, no, your daughter's actually upstairs dead as fuck. So like I said, the first concern that he has is towards her behavior with boys and drinking, and everything that's going on with the decoration in the house, and he's very judgmental towards that. So whenever they discover that she had met them to meet up for winter break or whatever, they go to the police department. So the police, I have a lot to say about the police department in this movie. The police initially brush it off pretty much stating that she's with some dudes, and it's just like, I think he said a lot of the women that go missing end up being with hanging out or like, you know, run off with boys. And I'm just like, is that the first thing you think of when a woman goes missing? And it's not necessarily a tale of the times, because it's very much so active now, especially with women that go missing, or women that claim but women that, you know, go and report harassment. The police aren't as reluctant to go and you know, make progressive steps to kind of like solve that, or like, you know, create some type of alleviation for that. So the police initially brushed off the claim that the women that go missing are generally off with boys. I'm just like, did y'all not hear that there was a rape nearby? I need y'all to be a little bit more aware of what's going on in your town and in your surroundings on this college campus. It's not until Claire's boyfriend comes and pretty much flips the motherfucking police station upside down that the police are like, oh shit. So it kind of shows that like when these women came and even the parents came and made this claim, they brushed them off, and it wasn't until an aggressive male figure came in and was like, yo, I need y'all to find my girlfriend, that the police were like, oh shit, we gotta find his girlfriend. You know what I mean? Like, why wasn't her or the claim of the sorority sisters enough for the police to take active action? So, do the police really believe anybody in this damn town or the movie? Because there was an instance where the 13-year-old girl hadn't come home, and the police were like, "Oh well, she's 13." Like, she's 13. I'm pretty sure she's not out with boys. And so even with this mother pleading, and like I think the father was like a truck driver, and the mother wasn't a single mother, but like conceptually like she was, because her husband was always working. Anyways, sexual harassment is not a regular boy activity. And regarding when the girls come back and like, yo, this dude's calling the house, like it's a lot of shit going on, he's making these vulgar comments, and they're just like, oh, boys will be boys. It's just like, no, boys will not be boys. That is not regular shit that happens. And it wasn't until Billy, who is the killer, actually threatened to kill them that the police wanted to actively do something. So moving forward to Jess's character, played by Olivia Hussey, who is my absolute favorite. She's such a badass in this movie, and I'm going to call this segment the A word. So the movie was created in 1974, and Roe versus Wade was passed a few months or so before this movie had premiered or was released. So I think Olivia Hussey's character was like this embodiment of fuck you, no, I do what I want, and regarding the fact that she's with child. So if you don't know or you haven't seen the movie, Jess is the final girl, and she's pregnant, and the relationship dynamic between her and Peter is really interesting, because Peter is very emotional and Jess is very logical. Jess does not want to have this child. She wants to have an abortion. And Peter kind of comes in and is like, oh, well, let's get married. And she's like, no, I don't want to get married. I want to focus on my career. I want to do what I want to do. And it's kind of like this dynamic where Peter acts irate and emotionally based in retrospect to Jess, who's just like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm not about to, I don't care what you say with anybody else. This is something that I'm going to do. So and back to talking about the final girl. So like the final girl trope is one of someone who is a virgin, who does not have sex, and we have Jess here, who is like a badass completely. Like, yo, I don't care. Not only am I gonna have sex, I'm pregnant and I'm not going to keep this child, and I'm set on that. You know what I mean? But it also plays a part in the toxic relationship that Jess and Peter have regarding his outrage and his outburst regarding the fact that she doesn't want to marry him. In my opinion, she doesn't even want to be with him. But it's the early 70s, so it's still that dynamic of like, the man is XYZ and the woman has to be under him or whatever. And it's just like the enormity in that of just like his behavior. And even to the point where she tells him that she doesn't want to keep it, and he threatens her. So that that is kind of like, okay, is Peter the killer? And then just the way that he reacts and when he pops up in certain areas in the film regarding when she's on the phone with with Billy. It's like, in my mind, I know at the end, obviously Peter dies, and she like, I don't know what she did to Peter, but that nigga did, and Billy is still at the end. But in my mind, Peter was the killer, or Peter was the main antagonist. Granted, Billy was one that was off and all the sisters, but Peter was like one of the main antagonists. Like, he's like, well, you can't have this abortion without me, and she's like, it's my body. So moving forward, again, like I said, Peter is definitely more emotional. I don't want to necessarily say more feminine like, because I don't want to make the two synonymous, but also, side note, Peter was definitely gaslighting the fuck out of Jess whenever she wanted to go, because Janice had went missing and she wanted to go look for her sorority sister, and Peter was like, well, you didn't want to have a talk? She's like, damn, nigga, my sorority sister is missing. Women are dropping like flies, and you trying to sit up here and worry about what I'm gonna do with my body. Anyways, moving forward to Barb's death. Barb's death in the movie was it was one of the most iconic deaths in the movie, one of the most graphic deaths in the movie. It kind of plays Black Christmas in retrospect to like Halloween kind of plays in that whole idea of there's not a lot of gore. I think Barb's death is probably the goriest in the movie, where you actually see blood that's on her finger. And so she's killed by Billy with this glass unicorn. And so Barb is this figure of like sexual expression and being like a badass and just doing whatever she wants to do, and she cusses and she smokes, and she kind of has a little bit of mommy issues too if you watch the beginning of the movie. But I kind of see the idea of like the glass horn that she's killed with in the film being like an act of like punishment for all of her like sexual behavior and her behavior with cussing and just not being what most would deem as ladylike. And it's literally one of the most iconic kills in the film. Also, just a little background on Billy. Billy is like talking or speaking or regarding his sister Agnes while he's killing Barb. So Billy definitely, giving a little backstory on him, who's the serial killer, he is definitely abusive, and he was abused. He abused his little sister and was abused himself, and it is implied that he killed his parents. Agnes doesn't like boys and Billy doesn't like girls, so it kind of is an act of like revenge at the fact that he's like seeking out these women in this sorority house. So the killer overall has an issue with women being sexual, and that's the main issue in the movie. Another main thing that really gets to me, even though I was talking about the fact that in my brain Peter is a killer, Billy gets away. Olivia Hussey's character Jess is like doped up and she's sleeping, and we think that Billy's a killer. The police, John Saxon's character, who's in the police force, and that other dumbass fucking police officer who we don't talk about, they think that, you know, Peter was the problem, when in fact at the end of the movie Billy is still there, and he has the sorority house mother's body, he has Claire's body, he's just up there having a tea party. And I'm just like, wow, it leaves like this emptiness of that women are not safe in their own bodies, they're not safe in their own homes, and that we are punished for being sexually expressive, we are punished for being not necessarily free women, but more progressive. And I think it's Black Christmas is definitely aging like wine regarding just its ideals on sexual harassment, how the police handle sexual harassment, and claims of such, how in fact that women can also be judgmental towards each other regarding rape and sexual harassment, especially with Barb's character, how she makes a comment like, you can't rape a townsy, or how whenever Claire's father comes in and he's judging everything in the sorority house, and the house mother's just like, oh, well, these girls are XYZ. And she's kind of co-signing to get that male approval from Claire's father. So I just thought those things were really interesting in this film. Like I said, again, I am collaborating with a few of my favorite Black horror creators to go a little bit more in depth on the plot of the first film and the other two remakes, and I think one of the other remakes just came out last year, but I just wanted to touch a little bit on just a few of the undertones in the movie. Thanks again, y'all, for listening to Monstrosities, Voice, Hearts and Touch Conversations. Our next episode will be coming out on New Year's Eve, and we'll have a special New Year's Eve episode to wrap up 2020. Thank God, because 2020 has been a hell of a year. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at MVHU Podcast, also on Twitter at MVHU Podcast as well. If you want to follow KFX Horror Group, which is like our big sister company, it is going to be at KF Horror Group on Instagram, and you can follow us, or you can follow the website at www.kfxhorror.com. Don't forget, y'all, to support Black horror and stay spooky.